Hey everyone, Sanjita here, and welcome to another Remnant 2 build guide. This time around, I'm bringing you my take on the Havoc form build that I'm calling the Archon Vampire. I've tested this out on a number of different bosses and enemies in Apocalypse, and it has been serving me very well, as I feel like this has a good balance of skill cooldown, damage, and built-in sustainability. Um, I hope it's going to be something that you may want to try out yourself and find that you have some fun with it. So let's go ahead and get into it, and I'll kind of give you the breakdown. As far as our archetypes are concerned, our prime is going to be the Invoker with either Way of Kaula or Way of Major, depending on whether you want to go with more of a damage focus or a support focus. And your major skill we're going to be using with the Archon is going to be the Havoc form, which is where we're going to be spending the vast majority of our time. Our armor is not really going to matter. In my case, I've gone with three pieces of the Leto Mark II paired with the Disciple Mantle just to give me some good armor rating, and I kind of like the look of this. It meshes pretty well for me. Our Relic is going to be the Profane Heart, which is going to give us an innate 3% lifesteal bonus as a passive. And when we actively use it, it's going to increase our lifesteal efficacy by 50% for 15 seconds. This is going to pair well with our Siphoner trait, which is another 3% lifesteal, which is going to give us a base 6%. And then couple that with the Leech ability, or the leech trait, which increases our lifesteal efficacy by 50%, we are going to be effectively having 9% of our damage returned to us as health at all times, up to 12% if we actively use the heart. Uh, our other traits that are worth mentioning are the chakra to give our mods an additional 30% duration just so they can stay out there longer, do their damage, also bring us in help and health, and to debuff our enemies. Expertise is a requirement here because we're going to need the skill cooldown. Spirit is always good to help us get our mods back faster. And regrowth is on here so that we have some other form of passive health regeneration as maybe something that can help top us off between encounters. As you notice, we do not have. This is the first build I've ever created, the first one I've really ever seen that does not have triage because unfortunately, triage won't be helping out in this very much, so we don't really need it. As far as our accessories is concerned, we're going to be using the Legacy Protocol for skill cooldown and duration, the Alumni Ring for elemental damage bonus of 10%, which is going to equate to all of our damage, the Burden of the Seolist to increase our skill damage and mod damage by 15% at a cost of 20% of our ammo reserves, which is not a huge hit since we won't be using firearms a whole heck of a lot. The Burden of the Stargazer, which reduces our skill cooldowns by 15%, but it costs us 15% of our health to use. Again, not a huge downside since we'll usually be getting that right back anyway. And then to round it all off is the Burden of the Destroyer, which lowers our firearm range by 35%, but increases all of our damage by 15%. Again, not a huge hit to us because we won't be using our firearms a whole lot. Speaking of our firearms, as you can see, we're going to be using the Monolith and the Nebula. This is mainly so we can be using the mods for both of these weapons, which is the Sandstorm and Nanoswarm, respectively. The biggest reason for these is because these have long durations, especially when we have the Chakra trait. They have long durations. They are a constant source of additional damage, which means that they are a constant source of additional health being returned to us. And both of these mods apply debuffs to our enemies to increase our damage we are dealing to them. Uh, with Corroded adding 10% damage, and then the debuff from the Sandstorm, which is called Expose, which increases or causes enemies to take an additional 15% damage from all sources. So that's going to buff not only the Way of Kaula, it will buff themselves as well, and it'll also buff the damage from our Havoc form. So it all kind of ties on together, and the more damage we do, the more health we regain, and we can usually keep ourselves topped off in most situations, with the exception of the horrendous one shots that we know this game loves to throw at us, or the occasion when we get wombo comboed. For the most part, though, you usually stay pretty vertical, pretty easily. Um, that's kind of it, except for one other thing that I almost forgot, is that you can see that right now we have a skill cooldown of 65%. To take that up a little bit more, you can always use a xenoplasm concoction to add another 10% skill cooldown to put it up to 75%, which is only 5% shy of the cap. Alternatively, you can swap out the alumni ring. It's the one I would probably choose. You could swap this out and put on something like the Black Pawn stamp, so that you actually have the 75% skill cooldown at all times, and you can use your concoction on something else. Generally, with the way this is all set up, is you will almost at any moment, at any given time, you will have both of the skill charges you will have for this available. You will always have at least 1 to 2 charges of Archon available, so you will have this at your fingertips at every single engagement. And in the case of boss fights, what you're typically going to want to try and do is apply both of your mods, apply your skill, and then go into Havoc form and lay waste. Um, and you can either decide if you want to wait for Havoc form to completely run its course before reapplying your mods, reapply the skill of your Invoker skill, and then go right back into Havoc form. Um, Most bosses that I have run into so far during my testing or during my play is I have not had really a single boss last past 2 uses of Havoc. Um, your mileage may vary, and of course, there are going to be some bosses that are tougher than other to use with this. For example, Shishala or you know which one, and Narude, and a few others. Um, but yeah, that's kind of just about it. Um, I personally am really proud of this particular. I'm proud of this build, and I think it's a really fun build, and I think it's something that you may have fun with. Um, so yeah, that's about it. Feel free. I've got some video clips of me doing some apocalypse bosses. Feel free to stick around and take a look to see how this looks in action. Thanks. So this fight here, and at least 1 or 2 of the other fights I have clipped in here, were actually done with an earlier version of this build. Um, these actually weren't one. This one here actually wasn't really one of the first fights I did, but this is one of the first ones I did when I started really kind of figuring out how to put all of this together. And this actually worked out a lot better than I had expected, and this has the same basic rotation to what I've recommended in the build guide. Um, so yeah, this was actually aside from a few mistakes, because I have a tendency to make those. I'm not perfect, and I make a lot of boo boos. Um, this actually went really smoothly, and I was quite pleased with the results. I sometimes have problems with this guy, especially on Apocalypse, because he likes running my butt over like that very first time and just one-shotting me like badly a lot. And I actually managed to get this guy on the first time, and I was really happy with it. This was actually my second attempt at this fight. I goobered up the first one and I couldn't find my rhythm, and I had almost messed it up again, as you saw. Um, but this is actually a really good example of how the rotation kind of works. Again, this is the same earlier version of the build that I had in the previous clip, but I mean, it still pretty much works out to work to how it actually is supposed to flow. Is, you know, you get in there, You get your mods running. You get those guys doing their job of putting in the damage, putting in the work for your health regen, and getting in there for the debuffs, and then just letting loose with Archon. This actually is also a bit of a good example of just how well you'll actually be able to keep up your Archons, because you notice I was down at 0, and then I jumped back out of it, and I had another one already available, so I ended up being able to use Havoc form 3 times in this fight, simply because Archon is able to refresh that quickly that you can pretty much do things like that and still almost always have that ready for you.
This isn't looking good.
This particular fight here went stupidly smooth. I'm not sure what it is about this particular fight, but this is probably one of the fastest burn downs I've had of any boss on Apocalypse with anything that I've come up with. I was actually mildly disappointed that she actually managed to escape me, and I had to deal with the tentacles. But as you can see, the tentacles were not even a problem, and that was probably pure luck, because if I got hit, I probably would have died. This fight here is actually probably one of the biggest surprises I've got. I have gotten so far with using this particular setup I've got here. I normally have so much problems with the Corruptor on high difficulty levels, because I'm having to deal with this thing here, and then I'm having to deal with big Squid Boy in the back, and then when he starts to want to do the big old Kamehameha wall cannons all the way down the aisles, I'm always trying to run away and get it from those. But this here actually went a lot better than what I was expecting, despite the fact that I made numerous mistakes on this, and I got super lucky a couple of times. Like for example, right here, I'm about to drop out of Archon here in just a few seconds, and then I'm going to take a really big hit, and I was lucky that did not kill me, but thanks to the way I've got this thing set up and way of Kaula was still working, I got the lightning bolts coming down. As you can see, those lightning bolts are chunking my health back up, thanks to that 9% life steal. I was really surprised as to how well this went, despite me making the mistakes that I did. Especially right here, this is actually the worst mistake I probably made, as far as I'm concerned, because I could have finished this guy off at least a little bit quicker, but I had forgotten that if you got the statue down, he stops whatever he's doing and goes to bring it back up again, and I was over there on the other aisle trying to hit it with Havoc form, and he's out of range for that. So this is actually one of the few fights I had to finish with a gun. But all in all, this went really well, and I loved it. I walked into this fight expecting things to go completely differently than how they ended up turning out. I mean, aside from my being a dope and rolling off the edge there, I was expecting this fight to be like really hard and really painful, but I realized after a while that I kind of just stopped dodging him, and I just started face tanking like everything he threw at me, because I mean, by the time he hit me, I usually had my health like right back, even with the cursed debuff on me. It did not affect me like one little bit, and I was honestly thoroughly surprised just as to how badly I steamrolled this guy. And on top of everything else, he has both hardy and elemental resistance, and it did not seem to help him much, if at all. And I kind of thought this was just funny, especially with his comments of "you can't kill me that easily," and then he dies by a lightning bolt outside of my range. Out of all the fights I used I captured for footage, this was actually took me the most attempts, and I probably had I had mistakes on this one, like trying to hit her with Sandstorm and missing, and so all I have to hit her with is my Havoc form and Nano Swarm because she would never go back over there towards it. This is one of the few times that I actually managed to run out of Havoc form without anything ready, and I also kind of lost track of it. But thankfully, Kaola's was still running and managed to put her down. But I was a little nervous when I went into the second phase with how little health I had. But thankfully, from the being able to trick out both of my mods and the lifesteal that I have built into this set, I actually got that back really quickly and was back into a comfortable position really fast. But I still had to be careful because I had learned really quickly on a couple of my previous runs that she could combo me out pretty quickly if I wasn't paying attention. But I mean, all in all, third try on Apocalypse, yeah, this was good. I liked it. Thanks for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed the video and you liked the content. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment or two. See y'all next time.